Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back for some more EVE Online. Today's video is going to be sort of a discussion video. We are going to have this discussion from Jita 4.4 as I just am about ready to go back towards the TAL and after bringing in some blueprint copies for sale. But yeah, today's video is going to be giving some of my personal tips for newer players that are looking to get active in the market to become a trader in EVE Online. Not an easy proposition, but this is basically a request from a viewer of EVE Talk who asked me, what sort of good deals they should be looking out for and how they could influence the market. Now let's maybe get started with the number one tip on something that I think as a new player you should not try to do. That is to influence the market and to try to make it in the trade hub. So Jita 4.4 especially, but also Amar, Dodixie, I think it's Rens and Heck that are like semi-trade hubs in Minmatar space as well. The problem is that without a huge fortune available to you, it is going to be very difficult to make any moves in those markets. They're just too big, there's so much competition, margins are already razor thin, and there are people that are actively trading in these trade hubs with such fortunes that they can basically drive players with just less money, less ISK available out of the markets, and which is something that is completely legal. Anything goes here. It's full of scams, it's full of problems, and it is for instance a perfectly viable strategy to start to buy everything and sell at a loss just to drive competition out of a certain market, something that in real life for instance would be regulated by a government. Here in EVE Online anything goes, and as a new player I would definitely not recommend starting out with station trading in Jita for instance. That is just not going to be a pleasant experience, I believe. What would I advise to do? Well, there are some stages I think that newer players can try to follow in order to get acquainted with how EVE Online works and in order to make their way into the market and become a trader in EVE Online. And the first one is, instead of trade hubs, look for some mission hubs. Not the most popular ones because those are already heavily competed for, but find systems where you've got, for instance, a couple of level 4 mission agents, which is something that I have done as well. If you want to find out where you can do that, you can go to the agency, agents and missions, mission agents, and then go for security for instance. You can set them up for level 4, and then you can either decide on a faction. Servants Sister of E, for instance, you can see we're at 736 here, so I've done quite a bit of missioning for them. Interbus is pretty high as well. I still have a lot of work to do, for instance, for the Kaldari state. And then on any corporation, you actually get a list. Look for a system that has perhaps 2 of them or more of them. And that is the reason why I am building up a presence in the system of Gekutami, because there are 3 level 4 security agents in that system. Now all 3 of them are in different corporations, and so my plan to make that another base of operations where I can do missions is going to take a lot of work to get those reputations going. But a system like that could be very interesting for a trader, because there you can take advantage of one of the most prolific aspects of people in general, that is their laziness. And in those mission hubs, players will just sell the loot and sell the salvage straight to the market without looking at the buy order prices, and that is where you can get a real start as a trader, because I think in mission hubs you will find goods that are super cheap, like just 10% of the normal price. You put up a buy order because no one else is buying that, and you're actually going to have lazy mission runners sell that stuff for you at such a low price. Gather that up a little bit, move that then to a trade hub and start selling there with 50-90% profits. It is absolutely possible. How do I know that? Because my brother has actually done that whenever we were missioning. I was more of a miner myself, so I was more working on a Hulk, working on a Machina, trying to get my Orca, making ore, compressing, refining, and then moving minerals. That was more my playstyle early on in EVE Online, but my brother was a mission runner, and he very quickly noticed what kind of loot he got out of those missions, what kind of salvage salvage was very much available there, and then he saw those markets put up ridiculously low buy orders and actually managed to get lots of stuff for very, very cheap, and thus then trade them with incredible margins. I think if you want to get started, that would be my first place to look for. The laziness of people can be a huge opportunity for traders that are willing to sift through all of those different loot tables and all the things that drop there, and then also of course have a transport ship ready to actually bring them to a better market. That would honestly be my step one. Look for those systems. Again, not the very best systems, because there you will have lots of traders already trying that tactic, but it will definitely be possible for you to find busy mission systems and take advantage of that. Next step, well, it is a little bit harder here, but I do think that Lowsec and Nozick can be very profitable places as well. But you have to accept two things there, I think. That is that you will have to, of course, take the risk of Lowsec and Nozick, and that in all likeliness you'll want to join a corporation in order to become a trader that takes advantage of what's available in Lowsec. The thing that you will notice there as well is, just like with mission hubs, there will be goods that will be overproduced locally and that are also pretty bulky perhaps to get out of, and that thus you will be able to buy very cheaply in Lowsec and in Nozick. And then one of the big advantages, but I think getting a corporation will be the best move in order to get that going, is that you can make ISK on both sides, because in those PvP heavy areas there are also ships and modules that will be in demand but not easily available locally, and thus if you can grab the cheap stuff, fit some transport ships with that, move it to a trade hub, sell at a profit, and then actually buy stuff that is in demand and that local players in the Lowsec system where you're doing your business are willing to pay a premium for, well, you can of course make both your trips worth your while, you know, have double profits from everything that you're doing there. It is very much possible to do that solo as well, but that does increase the risk that much more, and if you're actually in a corporation or in an alliance, well, they'll probably tell you some of the stuff that they'd like you to bring back from HiSec, or it will be a lot easier also to find people willing to sell you cheap stuff that is being overproduced locally. So after the mission hubs, if you're still feeling the need to go bigger, to try to chase the margins, and of course to take advantage of both trips, yeah, Lowsec and Nozick could definitely be another possibility. But as I've said, if you want to take that step, I would highly recommend that you join a corporation or even an alliance before you get started on that. And then after that, well, something that is possible as well, you will need some capital, I think, in order to do that. That is to take a look at differences between trade hubs, because all the trade hubs have a decently good volume and a decently good speed of selling, but there are definitely differences as well. You saw my video probably about the MR trade hub, and you saw, for instance, that blueprint copies there go for a lot more than in GTA 4.4. But of course, all the typical Sancha drops, for instance, from exploration will be a lot cheaper in MR than in GTA or, for instance, in Dodixie. And so having stuff in GTA, then in the MAR, and then in Dodixie, then trying to gauge those three markets to find differences where you could buy something in one, sell it at a profit in the other one, is another way to go. Something that's also much more solo friendly, but all these trade hubs are heavily contested, so it's also quite a bit more risky, and you will probably need some ISK in order to get started on that, because you won't find profitable trades in the really affordable or common parts of the market, like minerals, for instance, or PI. It's going to be very difficult to find those trades. We're talking in all likeliness stuff like faction modules, which are more easily gained from close by exploration systems that will then be more expensive in another trade hub. So we're immediately talking about an order of magnitude higher when it comes to just the cost of a couple of those modules, and also of course the risk of transport. starting them. So I wouldn't put that on the first place. As I've said, I would put that maybe even after having some experiences in Lowsec and Nozick. If you then decide, yeah, corporations and all of that, I'm more of a solo guy, that's not my thing, that is perhaps another option that you could give a try. And honestly, after that, of course, if you've found your way through all of that, you should be in a pretty good position to understand the market, and perhaps then you can get started on some station trading. For that, I would especially recommend that you first start with a rather large horizon, which is what I'm doing myself when I buy these things. For instance, here we've got some isotopes that I bought at these low prices. You know, I don't expect to have 1 week and then get like a 20% profit on these purchases. This is all for the longer term. It can take months before I decide to actually sell my purchases at a profit. If you want to go in here for Twitch trading to really get lots of risk very quickly, that is always going to be a very difficult proposition, unless, as has been said also on some of those comments, you have billions and billions of ISK to throw around. Then you can try to manipulate a market and eventually try to eke out a profit that way. One of the recent, examples of this has been the Legion. Let's see if I can find it here. Tech tree ships. Here is the Legion. Volumes were really low, and look at this price increase without a volume response. This is generally speaking a manipulation attempt. You see that we went here from 140 million to 190 million. We can also see up here a relisting of 6 ships at 200 million ISK. Now just make the quick calculation though. Someone in all likeliness bought pretty much everything that was between 200 million and 140 million ISK, about 200 legions, which is doable, but definitely not for a new player. And thus you know pretty much how much ISK was available to risk. This is definitely not a certain trade or anything like that, to risk in order to manipulate the Legion market, which is then a far smaller market than a lot of the others. So this is I would call this absolute end game when it comes to trading, and not something that a new player should attempt, but perhaps can shoot for in his career as a trader. This is very, very risky, very difficult to do, and takes a huge amount of ISK. So just to give a quick recap, yeah, if you're a new player, you're looking to become a trade, where are you pretty certain to be able to get incredible margins and also pretty low prices? Well, mission loot is the first place I would look at. After that, you gotta start playing the social game, get into Lowsec, get into Nozick. You're gonna have cheap stuff locally that you can sell at a profit in a trade hub, and then in the trade hub you'll be able to buy stuff that is needed locally that you'll be able to sell for a premium as well. A corporation or an alliance is going to hugely help you for that. After that, if you're more a solo-minded player, differences between trade hubs can definitely be an opportunity as well. But as I've said, you're not gonna do that with regular ships or with minerals or anything like that. We're talking more exotic, locally procured stuff, like for instance, exploration loot, in my opinion. And then yeah, finally, if you do end up becoming a mogul, let me know if you're gonna manipulate the market. It would always be awesome to actually have some knowledge about what exactly happens when people do that, although it's not very likely. It is a part of EVE Talk. It's something that I do look at myself. I find the market in EVE Online to be absolutely fascinating, and while I myself wouldn't call myself like a big trader or anything like that, I'm more an explorer or an all-around care bear. I dabble in that with the medium to long-term investments that you're seeing here. For instance, some PI materials, we've got some ice products, we have some advanced move materials, and then the geckos, for instance, for a long-term investment, a hedge against inflation, that sort of stuff. It is definitely doable for pretty much anyone, but you can just pour in as much time into that as you want. But the active trading and the market manipulation, yeah, if you don't have billions of ISK and a lot of experience, then that is not very accessible to you. There was also a quick follow-up question that I want to answer on this one. It was what about banks and like stocks, shares in EVE Online? There once was a player that was running an investment bank in EVE Online. Long story short, it was all a Bernie Madoff scheme where once the pot grew big enough, he told everyone, thanks for all the money, and he was gone. So the big problem in EVE Online, as I've said early on as well, the reason why you don't want to be a new player in a trade hub is that anything goes here. Trust is the ultimate currency that you should never give out to anyone that you cannot trust 100%, which for a lot of players is going to be anyone but themselves. And so banks have a very difficult time to actually take shape in EVE Online. Currency is super fluid anyways. You've got the wallet that is 100% safe. Nobody can just take that risk away from you. That's in your wallet, and so there is very little need for that. There are the trade forums where from time to time people ask for loans as like an investment and promise a return once they have the funds because they have a certain plan or something like that. But yeah, I've never done that myself. As I said, it's all about trust. If you give someone 100 million as an investment and they promise you 10% within a month and you don't get anything back, well, don't go crying to CCP. That's part of the game, and that is why we don't see actually established banks or anything like that in EVE Online. And then when it comes to the shares, there is stocks/shares. There is something in the game. It's shares of a corporation, but it's not a very developed or often used system. I think when it comes to like a no rules sandbox environment like EVE Online, that to some extent corporations and players accept that a tyrannic rule of a corporation leader is basically the best way to go. And so these shares do exist, and if I'm not mistaken, that if you do hand them out to like other players and directors, it involves having like a vote when it comes to, for instance, declaring a war to someone else. But other than that, it's not a very developed system. And again, it's that same problem. If you'd really want to start to introduce something like that, and you would want to do it yourself, it would be completely based on the trust of players into the party that develops that system. And well, everyone is just gonna assume that it's a scam, and experience shows that, well, it's not really needed in the game, and so it doesn't really have a chance to flourish, also because of how harsh the universe itself is. But yeah, that was a little bit of a discussion on a trade. Hopefully this can help some newer players find their way in EVE Online and New Eden, and perhaps get started on a trading career. Thank you very much for the suggestion. I love talking about this stuff because the market in EVE Online is absolutely something unique and very cool to cover. So thank you very much for that suggestion. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.